it is really important. Brand is not something that's only experienced from the outside in. It needs to be experienced from the inside out, or it's not going to be a reality. So I always think of brand defined as sort of the intersection of promise and perception. So, what do you, as an organization, promise to your people, to your investors, to the markets that you serve? And then, what perceptions are you creating out there so that people come to you with the right expectations? If those things are somehow misaligned, then you've got a problem because either you're undervalued, people don't see you for all that you are, or maybe you've hyped yourself up a little bit and they come into contact with you and they're disappointed. In either one of those cases, you're not getting the best relationship with your customer, with your employee, with your investor. So if I think about it from an HR point of view, you're building an organization that's powered by people. Now, we can talk about technology and other things. I'm sure we will today. But at the core, you're a part of an organization that's powered by people. And if those people understand why they're there and what brings them together and how they're going to be valued, how they're going to be measured, and what they should expect from an employee experience, what good looks like, what success looks like, the more successful you're going to be as an organization. If people come in and they have an expectation that's not met, that's a little bit of a recipe for disaster.
Hi there, I'm Denise Chaffin, and I am your podcast host for Talking TA. And today I have with me Ken Pasternack. And Ken is the EVP and the Chief Strategy Officer for a company called 2 by 4. And I will let you, Ken, explain your company, and then we can kind of launch into our conversation from there. And give us a little bit about your background as well.
Thank you, Denise. It's great to be here. I really appreciate you including me on your podcast. And yes, I'd love to tell you about 2 by 4 as well as my background. For the last 25 plus years now, I've been working in a business that I call identity strategy. A lot of people call it branding, and I want to talk about that with you today. But 2 by 4 is a full service marketing agency that starts with asking critical questions around an organization's reason for being. Why are we here? Why do we exist? What are we here to make a difference in? What's areas? And why should people care? Building outward from that to the promises that they make to their different audiences, and then, of course, the creative delivery of those processes. So, of those promises. So, 2 by 4, the X in 2 by 4 is actually the idea of a multiplier effect. That the clearer you are about who you are and your mission and your value proposition, the more impact you're going to make on the world. So we practice this every day with organizations of all kinds of different industries, sizes, and challenges. And the best ideas always lead to memorable creative execution. So it's also very fun to discover what we're trying to say and then come up with how we're going to say it.
Oh my gosh, that's great. Now, the company, when I saw you was looking at your website too, I
Mhm.
noticed that you guys do mention brand a lot.
We do.
One of the things I want to talk about though today is how this affects all of us in talent acquisition and human resources. Talking about identity, especially brand identity. I think it's a
Mhm.
big topic right now. And I think that
Mhm.
we're shifting a lot away from some of the old traditional ways of doing human resources and talent acquisition. We're kind of like rediscovering ourselves, I want to say. What you're doing will affect our industry.
Yes, great question. And it is really important. Brand is not something that's only experienced from the outside in. It needs to be experienced from the inside out, or it's not going to be a reality. So I always think of brand defined as sort of the intersection of promise and perception. So what do you as an organization promise to your people, to your investors, to the markets that you serve? And then what perceptions are you creating out there so that people come to you with the right expectations? If those things are somehow misaligned, then you've got a problem because either you're undervalued, people don't see you for all that you are, or maybe you've hyped yourself up a little bit and they come into contact with you and they're disappointed. In either one of those cases, you're not getting the best relationship with your customer, with your employee, with your investor. So if I think about it from an HR point of view, you're building an organization that's powered by people. Now, we can talk about technology and other things. I'm sure we will today. But at the core, you're a part of an organization that's powered by people. And if those people understand why they're there, and what brings them together and how they're going to be valued, how they're going to be measured, and what they should expect from an employee experience, what good looks like, what success looks like, the more successful you're going to be as an organization. If people come in and they have an expectation that's not met, that's a little bit of a recipe for disaster. Now, I know that reality is reality and that things fluctuate and markets change and realities change. But if you can really be clear as an organization about what your promise is to your people and to the markets you serve, you're much more likely to start off in a place of sort of solidity and alignment, which is going to yield better results.
When we talk a lot too about like corporate culture and values, you mentioned
Yes.
that. And one thing that I would like to kind of uncover here, speaking of value and how it ties into corporate culture, is what motivates us and also some behaviors that influence us individually and collectively as teams.
You said it just there. Connecting values to behaviors is really, really important. It's very easy, unfortunately, for a group of people to get into a room and come up with words that they believe are the types of words they should have on a poster up on the wall. And I don't mean to be flip or dismissive of that. It's important to have a short list of values that you all align behind and say, these are important to us. But what's really powerful is when you can say to yourselves, here's how we are going to behave that reflects those values. If a value does not suggest or even dictate a behavior, you may want to get a little bit more specific. I use words like innovation or trustworthiness a lot of the time. Those are big concepts that have a lot of different definitions and a lot of room to move. How is this organization going to behave in a way that delivers on that value? If you can get specific about that connection, you're going to those values will take on much more meaning, and they'll be easier for people to measure themselves against as well. So I really love that introduction of behavior into the equation. It's an important discipline. And the good thing about that also is I already mentioned that you can measure people based on behaviors. You can also reward them based on behaviors. So you're not just giving somebody an employee of the month award. You're saying this employee lived these values in this way. And if you do the same, then you'll be recognized as well.
Yeah. And get the front parking space at work.
That's right. Get the best parking space or the best view from your office or
Oh,
your
I've seen
cube.
that. I mean, we've all seen it, employee of
Yeah.
the month parking space. So
Yeah.
it's like, how do I keep that parking space, right?
That's right.
So how do we determine as a company, how do we determine values, especially if we maybe have new leadership? Because
Hmm.
that's happening a lot right now.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a really great question. And in fact, my organization is going through a leadership change itself. So we've been really examining what has gotten us to where we are today and what do we need to go forward. I think one of the processes I've found most helpful in this is called appreciative inquiry. You may be familiar with this, Denise. Your listeners might be, but it's a process that doesn't start with an empty sheet of paper, and it also doesn't start with what are all the problems we're trying to solve. It starts with this idea of when we're at our best, what does that look like? When everything's really moving, really shaking, really happening, and people are feeling energized, what does that look and feel like? How do we get more of that? And what are the values that connect us to those outcomes? So I would hope we live in a capitalist society, but I would hope that a company wouldn't just answer that question saying, we're making the most money. They're saying something that's more multidimensional than that. Sure, profitability is important, but there's so many other dimensions and human dimensions that those types of questions can help answer and help to really drill into what those values are. I can use my own experience again, going through an experience like that or a process like that. We've actually resolved that a lot of the values we had before the transition are still the values we're going to go forward with after the transition. We just need to make sure they're as concrete and behavior connected as possible.
Do you have examples?
Yes, we actually have a very short and straightforward and kind of funny mission statement. And it says, build great relationships, do great work, then eat.
I love
And
that.
all three of those pieces are there for a reason. Number one, relationships, relationships, relationships. We do not want to be a transactional type of place. We want to be a place where people know each other internally and where we know the people we serve and work with, because that's where the best work comes from. And that's why that do great work comes after building great relationships, because not all work is going to be great. We have a high standard, but through those relationships, we can define what good looks like and we can begin to set that bar and rise above it. And then the last one, then eat, is yes, it's funny and everybody needs to eat, but at the same time, it's really about gathering together and saying, how did we do? Did we cross that bar or did we fall down? If we fell down, didn't feel so good, how do we learn from that? And we have a real, like the kind of conversation you have over a family dinner table. It's what is it that we can do to further those first two things on the mission statement? So those three kind of tenets are still true today, but how you go about building relationships, how you go about doing great work. Certainly eating is still a very human thing that we all do in very similar ways, but those first two are changing tremendously. And so the hows are changing, but the whats, the values themselves have stayed really, really true.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up relationships because I'm doing a presentation on Wednesday, and my presentation is titled Relationship Intelligence.
Haha.
And it's it's about building relationships, and I kind of make the correlation between how we built relationships 35 years ago or 40 years ago almost, when I first got into this business, and how we build relationships now, and it's different in some respects, but then there are some common denominators, I think, between the 2. I think technology kind of pulled us into a different, I don't know, frame of mind about building relationships. Like you said, they became more transactional. So now we're trying to rebuild relationships. So, what are some of the upward trends that you're seeing on your end about building new relationships and creating new relationships with?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I love the anecdote that you just shared because it made me think of a couple of examples. A number of years ago, we were working in the financial services sector and we had a client and we noticed that banks talk a lot about relationships because what they want to do is they want to have a long-term relationship with their consumers or the businesses they serve. But one bank in particular, a large bank, defined relationships as number of accounts open per customer. That was their definition of a relationship. This other bank that we were working with was much more about, well, how did the customer do? How did their business do? How many times did we interact and what sort of results did we get? And so I think relationship intelligence is a wonderful concept because it requires you to understand what do we mean when we say relationship? How do we actually define a relationship? And how you define a relationship can take you from very transactional to much more human. I think in today's world, we are in this sort of crosshairs today of on one hand, there's this rising tide of soft skills and people thinking in more humane terms when it comes to working conditions, when it comes to how employees feel valued, psychological safety, and all of those things. On the other hand, there's this incredibly fast development in technology and how technology can take certain things off our hands, which in many ways feels threatening to people. And so I feel like relationships needs to take both of those forces into account and think about how do we define relationships in this day and age where psychological safety and feeling valued is more and more important and top of mind for people and part of their consideration when taking on or committing to or staying with a particular organization, as well as how do we make sure that we keep our eye on that while we're also using technology to its greatest effect when it comes to things like efficiency or seeing patterns that no human could see in the time that we have to do it, etc.
Have we swapped relationship building, though, for efficiency?
I hope not. I really hope not. I mean, another example I can use from the world I live in is there is this constant struggle in the advertising world between creativity and performance. Performance is all about the eyeballs, the numbers, the clicks, the things that you can generate by putting a lot of stuff out there at high volume, testing and learning and using the algorithm to kind of optimize your results. Creativity is about meeting people on a human basis and a human level. And this can be highly targeted using technology, et cetera. But you can't have one and not the other. In fact, there are studies that show the amount of lift an organization is able to achieve when they combine the heart and the brain or the creativity and the performance is so much more dramatic than if they rely on performance alone. So I use that as sort of an example of why I think that transactional mindset when it comes to relationships or that efficiency mindset, to use the word you just used, is only part of the equation. It certainly has to be there, but it can't be the whole thing.
You mentioned when we first spoke, you used a phrase, "We are better together."
Yes.
And I love that phrase. I think
Mhm.
because it's true. It's
Mhm,
always been true. It
mhm.
always will be true we're all gone. It's always gonna play out. How are we collectively, though, influenced by social media, and how can we use social media to be better together?
Yeah, that is a tricky question and a great question. I, personally unsubscribed from certain platforms because I did not feel that togetherness. In fact, I felt more apartness than togetherness in social media because of, many things. Anonymous, the anonymous nature of it allows people to kind of say what they want without necessarily considering other people's feelings. The fast pace of it enables people just to get out there and opine on something that they may not know a lot about or take misinformation and spread it. Those are all sort of the downsides of social media. But I think that the real benefits of social media are when you do find a community or a group of opinions that you want to hear from or want to harmonize with, it can be a very powerful amplifier for that. And so, what I hope organizations can do is once they've arrived at the values, the promise, the the way in which they're defining relationships and things such as that, that they look at the tools they have at their disposal, social media being a very big megaphone, and say, how do we channel these values, these aspirations, these definitions of relationship through this channel? How do we encourage our community to take our message forward? How do we engage with our community? And it goes back to that reward sort of behavior that I talked about earlier. How do we reward the types of engagements that help propagate our values and message? And how do we perhaps not silence or censor those opinions and voices that don't go in that direction, but help them see the value in what we really do represent versus that what we don't. I think that's a very powerful place for social media. I imagine in the world that you live in, platforms like Glassdoor and others like that could be both a blessing and a curse. And our opinion is how do we use the blessing part of that to really help people understand what we're really all about without experiencing us yet?
I think people are using Glassdoor and have had or have used it for a long time, almost as a barometer to see how well a company is doing or what type of an employer they are.
Yes.
Where, like, you've got LinkedIn, which in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, and I use LinkedIn all the time and I love it, but it's kind of turned into a Facebooky kind of platform where there's a lot on there that's not
Hmm.
related to business topics like it used to be more oriented in that direction. But you've got a lot of new platforms out there. Reddit is another one. I think
Reddit.
Reddit is one where people just are really like, this is
Yes.
how I feel about things and just kind
Hmm.
of blasting it out there.
Hmm.
So I don't use that one as much, but I think that people though, one of the things I've noticed about relationships is and I'll use LinkedIn again and maybe even Glassdoor, but there are almost like hall monitors, it seems like, that are on these platforms. They're saying, "Hey, you guys, we need to like keep this platform more professional. Use Facebook for some of these conversations." And so I like that when I see people doing that because I think that it kind of gets people back on track and
Hmm.
people so you can have great relationships with people, but you don't have to necessarily go off the rails with it as well. And I think people have done that a lot. And I think that it kind of started with COVID where people were
Mm.
coming off the rails.
Yeah.
And now people are trying to get back into like, all right, that's in the past now. Let's kinda get back into a more where we're acting like adults. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
And there's really no way to completely stem the tide of whatever it might be. Somebody who's talking about an organization in a way that's unsavory or perhaps untrue. Those things are going to happen. And what we've advised a lot of our organizational clients on is if you remain focused on the things that really matter to you, the details are going to happen the way they happen. But as long as you can draw people's attention to those things that really matter to you, they will continue to support you, to believe in you, as long as they see a role for themselves in that story. We had a university client who it's a public university. They've got 10 campuses. They are very large, they're very distributed, and they make promises to their public like affordability and diversity and access. But every single day of the calendar year, you can look at one campus someplace where they're falling down on that because some family couldn't afford it, or the campus doesn't reflect the community that it's in from a diversity perspective, or their kid didn't get in. And the reality is those things are going to happen because that's life, and the churn of life and details can be challenging at times. But if you continue to say, we know that there will be ups and downs, just like there's going to be ups and downs in any relationship, whether it's a family relationship, a friendship, a marriage, you and your pet, whatever it is, you and your colleagues, there's going to be good moments and bad moments. But what you need are those voices who say, hey, remember what we're here for? Remember what we said we really cared about? Can we focus on that? Or can we look at the areas in which we need to really work to make sure that we're still living those values? I think that's what those moderators on Reddit and other places can help do. And what, quite frankly, the people experts within an organization can do really, really powerfully to ensure that the community feels like there is something holding it together.
Who are those experts though, besides leadership? You know, because that's one of the things that I think that employees feel disempowered, if that's a word, to kind of be those trendsetters, to kind of help if they have a great idea. How do I push this forward? Especially if they're working for a larger organization where you've got this layer of leadership that's so far removed from the rest of the population of employees, right? How do they push their good ideas and their good trends upward?
Well, I kind of think of it, it's a great way of thinking about it. Rather than leadership pushing things downward, it's the people who are making the organization run, making sure that their ideas are seen, valued, their contributions are seen and valued, et cetera, and that they're not being either stifled or ignored or just kind of left out in the cold. Um, I think that that union of sort of ethos, why we are here, to behavior and action is really important. I think if people are able to understand how to present ideas or to draw visibility to their behaviors, in that this is an expression of that value that we know we all have, and that's why I'm doing it. I think that begins to gain people's attention because it fits into a lane, so to speak. It's not random, it's actually connected. I think those are powerful vehicles. Certainly, communication is a discipline that's always going to need to be honed within any organization. And I'm not just talking about platforms that enable communication like email and Slack and other things like that, but just practices and processes for good communication. I think that if leadership cares about ideas coming up from below, communication is really what they need to be able to foster, is a feeling of I have the tools and resources I need to put the communication out there. I know what the content needs to be. I feel safe putting it out there because it's in alignment with our values and what we are supposed to be behaving. And I know from my company's policies or practices or promises that they will respond. Whether that response is, hey, that's a great idea. We can't do that because of X or Y reason, or fantastic idea. Let's meet on this and let's put together a team and make it happen.
I love that. I remember working for a company. I was a contractor for them in 2000. Oh, I worked for them from 99 to 2005 when the internet was still relatively new
Mm.
and intranet was
Yes.
new inside
Hmm.
of the companies. So you had your external communications that went out, but the intranet was new and that was like just amazing. I wonder how many people are really utilizing their internet service now with communications, and how well is communications tying in with talent acquisition and HR? And the reason I bring this up is because as recruiters, we're now told, okay, you guys have a new role now, especially now with the AI is taking over some of your redundant tasks. You guys need to be looking more forward as talent advisors, talent
Hmm.
coaches for people
Hmm.
inside your organization. So, how can we couple then with our intranet team or our communications team to where we're collaborating with them as people are bringing ideas forward and being like, again, the traffic cops to kind of help guide some of those ideas and some of those conversations upward.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's really important. I mean, there's a couple different pieces that I'm hearing you mention and that I think about a lot with my own organization that need to come together. One is just the different channels of communication, right? For example, in my organization, email, Slack, text, as well as a project management tool like Asana are all in play all the time. And who knows which exact channel is the right channel for each message? Nobody. Nobody. So that's a policy thing. That's a business process thing, and that's actually an area where AI really can help because AI can create some standard frameworks whereby it doesn't matter anymore which one of the the platforms you use to input, it goes to the right person in the right context and it elicits the right reaction. So I do like that. But the other piece is thinking in kind of a more macro level is again applying appreciative inquiry. What are the results that we're really looking for? What when things are really working, what does that look like? And how do we achieve that more often? And what's the role of technology in that? What's the role of communication protocols in that? And meeting frequency and types of meeting? And what's the role of both leadership and rank and file employee in making that work? And so I think combining your efforts to think about the enablers being the platforms and the technologies, as well as the ethos or the policies and the practices that you want to emulate, you find that middle ground. And it sounds easy. Of course, it's not. It's very complicated. But finding that middle ground will take you to a place, I think, where communications really moves better. It's a hope for my organization, at least.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Well, and I think again too, having the voices, one of the things that, oh gosh, this probably goes back 10 years now. There were companies, external companies that were actually selling services into larger corporations. I remember one of our clients is using this service and they were creating pulse surveys.
Yes.
And they were doing pulse surveys with their employees to determine, "Hey, do you have any good ideas? How do you feel about your role? How do you feel about your organization that you work for, your team, your direct manager?" All these different things so that they could kinda keep track of what was going on collectively with all these different departments so that people did have good ideas, they could kinda be brought forward and I don't know what the outcome was of all these pulse surveys, but I thought it was such a fabulous idea at the time. What do you hear about that type of thing?
I hear two things. One is that it's very important. People do want to have a voice. They do want to have an impact and they want to feel as though their voice being heard. That's what connects to the second piece is if they don't feel like they're being heard, then the value of that type of tool or service goes down very, very quickly. So an organization needs to do two things. Number one needs to reach out and touch its community and say, what do you think? What are your opinions? What are your ideas or questions? But secondly, it needs to come back and say, "We've heard you. Here's what we heard, and here's what we're doing as a result." The answer may be, "We're not doing what everybody wants us to do, but here are the reasons why." That's an acceptable answer. It may not be the answer people want to hear, but at least they see they've been heard, their question's been asked, and the answer came back. It's not the answer they wanted, but they understand more about why it's the answer, not the answer they wanted. In other cases, though, it's going to be, "We heard you. We see how important this is to you. We can make it work. This is what we're doing. Here's what you can expect." Then the next pulse survey comes out and someone's like, "Oh, great. I'm going to answer that one. I'm going to tell them what I think because I saw the results of the last one." So both of those things have to come into place. And the second one can be a lot harder to operationalize than the first, especially if you're a small organization that moves fast, or if you're a big decentralized organization where all this information is never really aggregated. The good news is there are some really powerful platforms that enable this and that begin to provide those action steps and that help leadership see very clearly what their options are and what their choices might be. And so I hope to see more of that real time engagement between leadership and staff. And I think that also helps close that gap that you talked about earlier on.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned too the use of AI, being able to incorporate AI into these kind of conversations so that there is follow-up, right? And so that there is something that's working on the back end, and if it's automation, then let it happen, right? That's working on the back end to make sure that the conversations continue and that people stay engaged, that this isn't just a one and done type of pulse survey or any kind of survey for that matter. I know there's people coming in that have 30 days being surveyed. Oh, how was your first 30 days? How was your onboarding? People who leave the company are being surveyed. What are they doing with all that information? Is it just getting stockpiled? Are they actually taking measures to correct problems that might be happening? I mean, so these are all like big questions. Now, and one of the things too that we had talked about was layoffs. There have been a huge number of layoffs, so the people impacted by those, are they surveyed? Are the people who are affected by layoffs or reductions, they like to call them, were they surveyed? What were their reactions? And how are companies sharing that information with their other employees? Or how are they sharing that information with the community, especially if they want to re enter the community post a layoff and that they want to kind of re engineer whatever it is that they're doing for their industry? How are they sharing that information so that they are kind of rising to the top again?
Those are big, big questions. And I think I don't have any data on this, but I intuitively think that it's the organizations that do survey people post layoff are probably in the vast minority because most organizations just want to move on. And certainly from a business operations perspective, that makes sense. But from a human sort of talent and reputation, as well as cultural point of view, it's not necessarily the best thing to do. Um, we as humans don't like to communicate bad news. We prefer to communicate good news. We either hide the bad news, which makes it worse usually, or we try to couch it as good news. The one thing I might suggest to listeners here who might work for organizations who may be facing layoffs is again tie any decision that's been made by leadership to the values and the purpose of the organization. Why did we have to make this decision? How does it help us further our values as an organization? What is the harm to our organization that's happening as a result of this layoff? Because there is harm. There's harm in terms of morale, a feeling of concern among people who are still around, a feeling of "I told you so" when people said AI is going to take our jobs. All of these things that could be circulating that they're not addressing. So address it, but address it in the context again of why we're here, why do we matter, what are we trying to accomplish as a group of people collectively together, and how do we hope to move forward from this? I think those types of communications, people, even those people who may have been let go, might receive with some sincerity and appreciation, especially if they're also asked, "How do you feel about this?" Got to be ready to receive some negative opinion and negative emotion there. That's understandable.
But let it happen because here's the thing, who's to say you don't wanna bring that person back at some point?
That's right.
There's the other piece of that. How many people were let go during a reduction, and then all of a sudden the company says, "Oh, we let go of who? We need
Yeah.
to bring them back. We're missing that talent, that skill, and now we need to, like, either bring somebody new in, or do we wanna bring somebody in who already knew the culture of our company, who's already worked in our company, and they were a good employee?"
Right. Yeah.
So if you did do a pulse survey with them at the end, or a survey, I should just say, at the end of their time before the layoff, and they did voice their opinion, and maybe it wasn't like a positive message, but at least they got to voice it. Chances are they're gonna be more receptive to you if you do call them back.
Yes. That's right.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So what stories do we tell to elevate, right? The positive and keep going after a layoff?
I think one of the probably most important things, and some organizations do this really well, is just the reset. Just to the very intentional reset to say, this has happened. This has happened for an important reason, which is that this wasn't financially sustainable or it was taking us in a direction that we are no longer going in. But here's the reset. Return to why we're here and what we care about, or why we're here and what we care about needs to evolve because of these external forces. Could be politics, could be technology, could be economics. We're no longer in the X business. And that's why we had to remove that piece of our organization. But the good news is we are completely focused on why. That's the business that we're in now. And we want you to understand that you're here because we value you. We understand that you're part of this story. And we look forward to sharing with you how that looks to us in the future. So, really, really clear reset and sort of recalibration, so to speak, of all those expectations. Um, that's I think number 1, but then number 2 probably needs to be put into place some sort of structure for evaluating and measuring how people are picking up the information and working with it. Change management is an important capability that an organization is gonna need to have, and the first question in terms of change management, why are we doing this? The next question is, how are we gonna do this? And the third question is, what's in it for me? And you need to make sure that we start with why, not just what's in it for you. And certainly don't just start with how, because then the nuts and the bolts are going to get in the way of the human heartbeat.
When you had mentioned too, looking at the big picture in our previous discussion around this, look at the big picture versus the day to day.
Right.
and having that big picture idea to kind of work towards.
To me, always been really critical. I've seen such great results when organizations have, let's call it a North Star. You can tell the brands who have that from the brands who don't in the way they market, in the way they hire. In the old days, you go to a theme park that is part of the Walt Disney enterprise, and everybody from somebody sweeping the street to somebody in a Mickey costume to somebody running a ride or a host knows their role in creating that magical experience for the family. They know it, and they know the outcome that they're looking to achieve. And you can describe the process that they go through as onerous and things like that. And there's certainly going to people who are disgruntled in any organization, but having that North Star can be so powerful. Another story that comes to mind is Southwest Airlines. This came out of a book a number of years ago. It was called The Biology of Business. And the point of the book was that they're in nature, they're these self-organizing systems that just have the innate laws in their DNA and they organize around these things, even if they don't connect to each other. And in business, you can have the same thing. As long as your values are clear, then the people who are living those values can live them in their own ways. And the example was Southwest Airlines. They're just about to take off. They've got a plane full of people. Maybe they're going to Las Vegas. And this is before peanut allergies became a big thing. So the story was the flight attendant gets on the loudspeaker and goes, "Hey, everybody, we're ready to go, but the peanuts have not arrived on the plane." And they used to be known for their honey roasted peanuts. And they said, "Policy dictates that we're not supposed to leave until the peanuts arrive. But I want y'all to take a vote. Should we stay or should we go?" And the passengers voted to go. And she's like, "All right, no peanuts, we're going." That was a beautiful expression of an organization that's living its values, even if it violated a policy, because it asked the customers what they wanted right there in the spot. And I can imagine going back into a management meeting, that flight attendant goes, "Well, this is the way it went down, and this is a decision I made." And their leader could have said, "That was the perfect decision. We're going to change our policy to say, this is our preferred way of going because this is how we make our money, et cetera, et cetera. This is how we deliver the best customer experience. But in the event that that's not possible, you may ask the passengers what they'd prefer to do." It creates a sense of value and participation. And that flight attendant probably felt like $1,000,000 because they'd done the right thing.
And not only that, but they're funny. Okay, there is
Yeah,
nobody
right.
funnier on an airline than Southwest Airlines.
Just laid back, informal, wearing shorts. Let's just get there. I know the experience of flying someplace is not the best part of the trip.
Yeah.
We just wanna get you there.
There was one of the flight attendants got on the microphone, I don't know, it probably a flight that I did 6, 7 months ago or something, and she made this comment. She said, "Oh, our pilot is new, but she's looking at YouTube to see how to fly the plane." I mean, it was just the funniest talking. They were all like looking at each other like, "Okay." But
They're joking,
they're
right?
just yeah, they yeah, the levity when you're
Mhm.
flying with them is just so it's refreshing. So, yeah,
Refreshing
that's a good
because it's
story.
going into values and behaviors, flying is a tense experience for a lot of people. And not because they're afraid to fly, it's just because you have to make everything on time, traffic to the airport, getting through security, managing your bags, you don't know who you're gonna sit next to, especially previously on Southwest. They're there to say, "We know this is hard, and we're here to make it a little easier." And they do all the little things. It's really it's a great study of how an organization's values get lived and expressed.
Yeah, they're a great example, and that whole "we are better together," that plays out really well with this story.
Yeah, yeah,
You also talk about the winning attributes that we have to look forward to. I mean, you had mentioned simple, distinct, and true, the lasting benefits for a company. So, yeah, so the Southwest Airlines example is a perfect
yeah.
example for that.
And yeah, simple again, going back to how do we define relationships? It's gotta be something that everybody says, "Yep, I get it. I understand." Distinct, we're not a transactional organization, we're a human-led organization, right? These are the behaviors and the values that exemplify how we go operate in the world. Okay, that's distinct. We have coffee cups at my my company that say, "We don't hire jerks and we don't work for them." But that's
I
a
love
value.
Yeah, it
We
is.
value kindness. We value collaboration. We value good-spirited collaboration, and if you're not on board for that, maybe this isn't the place for you. And if you're not on board for that as a client, we're probably not gonna achieve that great relationship that we're looking for, so maybe this is the where we get off. That's distinctive. So simple, distinct, and yeah, absolutely, it's got to be actionable. It's got to be something that creates an outcome. If you can line those things up, you really on your way.
So, but going back though to HR and talent acquisition, how do we kind of recreate, if you would, this kind of energy around people who are working in HR now? Of course, and now they're calling it people operations. They're kind of getting away from human resources. People are wanting to take a whole different approach to the way HR has always been kind of viewed in the past. So as we make these adjustments and rebranding or creating a new identity for HR and talent acquisition, what are your some of your suggestions on that?
Well, I like to dig into the term talent acquisition personally because that's got two really important words. Talent is one of them. That's more than just that's not just a number, right? That's not just an individual that's here to do a task. That is a person who has something innate that you want with that them to add to your collective. You want them to be part of that better together equation. So I love that word. And I do think that people versus human is a better term too. And then acquisition. Acquisition is a little bit more transactional, but it's still about getting people on board. It's getting people to participate. It's not about just adding a person to a cubicle. It's not about head count. It's about participation. And so in the spirit of that, I would imagine and I would hope that from the very beginning, you're thinking about how do we create the right expectations among those people who could be our talent going forward? Which means when we put out information seeking new talent, what does it say and how does it say it? You certainly have to have all the features of the job and all the expectations of the job, but could you write that in a way that first helps them understand what's the promise that they're buying into? Could you write that in a voice that is the voice of the organization versus a dry type of listing that you might see on Indeed or somewhere else? Those are some early ways of setting new expectations and bringing talent in with a mindset that is, this is a place that is different, meaningful, and the kind of place that I could see myself investing my time and my talent. Then, when it comes to the onboarding and the touch points, how do those values and behaviors come to life in that process? Because you referenced human resources and you referenced the way human resources has operated in the past. And it was really about, yes, bringing the talent in, making sure that the policies are understood, making sure that people are both protected and productive. But that's kind of it. And the expectation has evolved, which is, well, I don't just want to be protected and perform. I want to feel valued. I want to feel like I'm involved and informed and that I'm part of this collective and that we're doing something together. And what's the role of these people professionals in doing that? So all of those connection points are really important to consider and to almost map out the talent journey from unaware to aware and interested to interested in applying to applied and interviewed to offered the job. Now it's the onboarding. Now it's the first, like you said, the first 30 days, the first 90 days. How do those evolve throughout? And what's the role of the people and operations professionals in fulfilling that on a daily and weekly and monthly basis?
Ugh, true. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see as we kind of like leap forward how, especially now with all the automation that's coming in, how we can kind of couple the human aspect of it like you said, the talent. One of the things about talent acquisition, we say talent attraction a lot too, for attracting talent in. So the acronym TA kind of has a double meaning. But when we talk about human judgment for a minute, and preserving human judgment, especially in a world right now that's increasingly shaped by automation and algorithms. How are we going to kind of soften that and remind people, hey, we're still here. The human part of this business is still here because people are really concerned about AI and about automation, removing them from the equation. How do we kind of soften the blow and help people to understand this is still a human world we're living in, a human-oriented world we're living. There will be other human roles that we need to hire people for that we're not gonna be giving to automation. How do we kind of, like, send that message? What are some of the ways for especially on the identity side of this business?
Mhm. I kinda go back to what I was saying much earlier about that, you need to have both kind of hemispheres of the brain, right? You have to have the right and the left brain. So when I was talking about performance versus creative in the communication space, I see it similarly here. There's going to have to be an automated piece to this for efficiency, for being able to cast a wide net, to be in some ways even better at recognizing and attracting talent because you can the diamonds in the rough show up in ways that perhaps you might not have seen them if you were an exhausted person going through, 1,000 resumes a week or whatever it is. You're actually being served these things in ways that perhaps are enhanced, but that doesn't mean your discernment doesn't matter. It doesn't mean that the intuitive side doesn't need to kick in, both in how you train the model to bring you the information you're looking for. How do you help it know what good looks like? How do you help it know what talent looks like? And how you respond to the information comes in. It may come in and you say, it doesn't feel right to me. I'm going to do this again, or I'm going to do this myself because I just want to corroborate. I find myself doing that all the time. Even though the information and I think my prompt has been great, information comes back to me and I say, I just have a sense that based on my experience, my years on this planet, that there's something else here. And that matters because now it's not just straight up machine regurgitation, it's a human heartbeat. I think being able to use the different tools at our disposal, whether that's AI training, I mean training the engine itself, training people to use the engine and respond to it, but also experience and discernment. And finally, the theme that I've been kind of touching on this whole time, communication, making sure that this is clear. I think that's got to all work together.
Well, we talk about too in an AI-enabled world, which is where we're at now. What always must remain intentionally human. And those are the pieces I think when you talk about communication that we need to communicate out to people. What are we going to keep intentionally human as we automate the things that need to be automated? What's that messaging out? What are you hearing from some of your customers that's working? What are some of the ideas that they put forward that's like, oh, okay, this is a fabulous opportunity for us to communicate and to kind of give that intentionality, if you will, to what we're doing.
Thanks for the question. I think I mean, there's no question that the field you're in, Denise, is only going to rise in importance because of that human to human relationship building that is so important to success in just about any business space or any organizational space. Um, I don't have a ready answer for how to create the right balance between the bot and the human. Although this is going to sound like an aside, but bear with me for a second. I was talking with somebody a few months ago about AI, and AI stands for artificial intelligence, but AI could also stand for, right, ready for this, ancestral intelligence. Now, the reason I think that's important is that AI has been written and created by human beings, not by machines. It's changing. Machines are now contributing to it, but it comes from someplace, and that someplace is where we all come from. So there's still a humanity built in to how this technology is operating, but it can't become a substitute for it. We still have to rely upon all those things that either are innate within us or that we learn through our upbringing or our cultural educations, our actual educations. Those things are just going to become more and more focused. If you think about television, everybody thought television was going to make live entertainment go away. Quite the opposite. Live entertainment just got better, right? Then the internet came and everybody said, "Oh, well, this is gonna go away. That's gonna go away." No, those things still exist. They just got the or radio or whatever it is gonna make books go away. No, people still buy more books and read more books than they've ever read in the entire history of the world. Why? Because their place has become more and more well defined and their value has become more and more clearly apparent. They're just no longer the only go-to. So in this particular case, AI is gonna be really important. It's gonna be basically it's gonna become like electricity at some point. We're all gonna be know it's there, it's gonna be serving us, but it's gonna make everything else better. Now that sounds really Pollyannish, and that's not exactly what I mean, but we're all gonna have to focus. It's gonna be rocky at times, but the ancestral intelligence is a factor that I think is going to help us work with artificial intelligence to find that balance.
I love that ancestral intelligence. I'm hanging on to that one. Yeah. I hope I can steal that line from you because that is really important.
I think it's an idea worth stealing.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. And sharing with others. For sure. Yeah, it's interesting. I remember when we started working with the internet and everybody had the same fear and trepidation around where is this going to go here with the internet? The one thing I think though, in looking back, and maybe we have to kind of talk about ancestral intelligence, we have to kind of look back at what worked for all of us when the internet started, what didn't work. I think in talent acquisition, one of the things that we found later on that we were losing, and that's one of my points in writing a presentation on relationship intelligence, is we were losing our connectivity with other humans because we are doing things so transactionally. And automation helped us to do things faster and to build candidate pipelines, for example, faster for our clients. But what happened was all of a sudden we went from working with 5 to 10 candidates a week. Now we are working with 50 to 100 candidates a week. And we couldn't take the time to develop a relationship with each one of those people the way we had done in the past. So now we go back to, okay, so here we are with AI. How are we going to use AI to help us get back to having relationships with people, that ancestral intelligence, like you're talking about, the way we used to have, versus having everything be so transactional? So we're kind of at that crossroads, I think. But we can use AI to do that. So can we then take what we learned then from when the internet first started, where it took us, and then maybe repivot and go back to some of that, and so I love that ancestral intelligence of what we learned from that and take it forward. Using AI though to help us get there.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope so. I mean, as you just said, the model is there. The pattern is there. I mean, I went to a talk when somebody talked about the internet and all the people were talking about social media and all the negative things that have happened as a result of social media. And he's like, well, when the Gutenberg Bible came out and the printing press was invented, the same thing happened. There was this explosion of misinformation. And it's just a human pattern that we all have to understand is going to happen, but we'll navigate it and we'll find the sweet spot and we'll find the benefits. And like you said with Reddit, we've identified that some platforms are going to be better than others at that signal to noise ratio and really fostering the real conversation. I hope, I don't know, but I hope that with AI, this a similar pattern will emerge. There will certainly be false starts. There will certainly be danger moments. There will certainly be actions that organizations take that they later regret. But I'm hoping that if you look at the longer curve of progress, that this will also become one of those things that we adapt to and continue that ancestral intelligence throughout and elevate our roles.
I love that. So in closing, I've got two more questions here. One, what decisions do you think should never be fully automated?
One decision would be, does this person align with the culture that we're striving to have at this organization? I don't feel like a machine can answer that question fully. I think that's a really important question. And that's not just for the organization, that's for the person who's coming into the organization. Are they going to be rewarded for the experience of being with us? I think that's a very, very human question that requires interaction, requires time, and will always be something that should be left to people with experience and professional training and understand the values of the organization. Um, I would also hope that on the other end of the spectrum, that when the layoffs do happen or when a performance issue comes up, that those decisions are also not automated. That the decision to terminate is always one that is a human, either human led or human completed decision, in that just having a machine decide that the numbers don't add up and so this wing of the building has got to be demolished could be really harmful to an organization's culture, its purpose, its promise, its reputation. So those are two areas where I can see people are never going away. They're really, really important and probably plenty of space in between.
Oh, sure. I agree with you on that. So, final question. Let's talk about great human stewardship and what it looks like in a modern organization.
Well, the first thing that came to mind, I can't believe this, just a very vivid image just popped in my mind, was like a captain of a ship looking out towards the horizon.
Oh, I like that.
You know, it's that we're not going to let the waves disturb our mission. We know the waves are going to be there. We're going to keep our eye on the horizon and understand what that goal is, what that ethos is, the thing that we're all collectively rowing or whatever operating this organization towards, and having the fortitude to understand that the small things are going to happen. Um, that's the one thing I think that I would advise is just really try to keep that steady horizon in your sight because yes, you're going to have to manage details and people and all those things on a daily basis, but don't let that steal the horizon view from you.
I love that. That's great. Thank you so much, Ken. This has been a very an awesome conversation, and I'm gonna steal the ancestral intelligence. I think that we should rename, in fact, instead of artificial. Just kind of just let's speaking of, yeah, looking at the horizon. I mean,
Right.
we could actually make that change, right?
Right. Well, Denise, it's been a real pleasure. I've enjoyed this
Thank you.
conversation as well.
Yeah.
And
Thank
I hope your listeners get something out of it as well.
Oh, I'm sure they will. Thank you so much, Ken.
Okay. Thank you.
All right.